Well, welcome back. This is Module 5 of Precinct Chair Training for the Republican Party of Bexar County. Well, you've gotten to Module 5. Hopefully, you've looked at 1 through 5 or 1 through 4. If you haven't, any of those stand on their own and you can go back and watch them. We've had this slide before. Learning is an exciting adventure, and the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. Edmund Burke. So welcome again to Module Training for Precinct Chairs. There are two ways to view and review this material. There is a PDF version, which is the slides only, and the MP4 video version, which is what you're watching right now. You may want to download the PDF format for your own records and actually start a PC or Precinct Chair notebook. These modules are designed to be open source and shareable. If you have any questions, please contact us at GOP headquarters here in Bexar County. Go to beargop.org or call us at 210-824-9445. These files will not self-destruct, but they will impact our enemies when we put them into practice. So if you have printed out the PDF version from previous modules, may I suggest that you take some time and look over what you have learned so far. In each of the modules, I try to spend a little bit of time getting acquainted with one of our founding fathers. And in this module, we're going to look at John Jay. Here's a couple of quotes. No power on earth has a right to take our property from us without our consent. And how about this one? Among the many objects to which a wise and free people find it necessary to direct their attention, that of providing for their safety seems to be first. And we certainly know that here in Texas. In any of the Western movies, you know, as people move into an area, they settle, and then somebody moves in that tries to take advantage and buy up all the land, and they hire a sheriff to set things right. So here's some action steps for Module 5. Number 1, continue to revisit and revise your vision statement from Module 1. Continue to picture our county executive committee meetings with more unity. And in this module, we're going to be looking a little bit at Robert's Rules of Order. And there's going to be 2 handouts that we'll give you and can also be found on our website. And let us know if you have anyone that would like to become a precinct chair. In Module 5, we'll take a look at John Jay. By the way, he was our first Chief Justice, and the importance of prayer. We'll look at the 8 basic constitutional principles. We'll look at inalienable rights versus civil rights. And we're going to spend some time in this module talking about Robert's Rules of Order. We'll go over some of the basics. We'll look at the principles of parliamentary procedure and being prepared for a CEC meeting. The first thing that comes out is what's called the call and the agenda. And then we can go online and look at motions that are being considered and resolutions. We'll talk about the different types of voting that we may run into at a CEC meeting and when to use points of order in parliamentary inquiry. We've got some resources and some handouts that we'll give to you. Again, this can be very confusing when you first start going to a CEC meeting if you're not familiar with Robert's Rules of Order. So let's get to know John Jay a little better. Here's some highlights. He also is considered a founding father. He was born into a prominent merchant family in New York City, and he was a descendant of the Huguenots. Now, they are ones that came to New York to escape religious persecution. He was the second president of the Continental Congress. Again, that's the group that met during the Revolutionary War. He helped draft the Constitution for New York in 1777. He was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of New York, and he was appointed as the first Chief Justice of the United States. It's interesting that the courts, in the first 3 years, what they did is they worked on establishing rules and procedures. They only decided 4 cases in 6 years. That's amazing. He was recognized for his peacemaking skills, especially involved in signing the Treaty of Paris, which helped to end, which did end the Revolutionary War. He also is known for writing 5 of the 85 Federalist essays, called the Federalist Papers, along with James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. And if you've never spent some time reading the Federalist Papers, it's well worth it. That'll give you an idea of the language of the Constitution and what it meant at the time of the founding of our country. He was elected the second governor of New York, and he also served as president of the American Bible Society. Quotes by John Jay. No human society has ever been able to maintain both order and freedom, both cohesiveness and liberty, apart from the moral precepts of the Christian religion. Should our republic ever forget this fundamental precept of governance, we will then be surely doomed. Real Christians will abstain from violating the rights of others, and therefore will not provoke war. Almost all nations have peace or war at the will and pleasure of rulers whom they do not elect, and who are not always wise or virtuous. Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty, as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation, to select and prefer Christians for their rulers. Prayer by John Jay. I thank thee, the great sovereign of the universe, for thy long continued goodness to these countries. Notwithstanding our ingratitude and disobedience to thee, our merciful deliverer and benefactor, give us grace to turn unto thee with true repentance and implore thy forgiveness, and be pleased to forgive us and bless us with such portions of prosperity as thou seest fit to be fit for us, and with rulers who fear thee, and walk in the paths which our Savior hath set before us. Be pleased to bless all nations with the knowledge of thy gospel, and may thy holy will be done on earth as it is done in heaven. Let's recite the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And let's recite the U.S. Pledge and the Texas Pledge. First, the U.S. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you've never listened to Red Skelton's recitation on the Pledge of Allegiance, you can find that on YouTube and in other places. It's really terrific. And now the pledge for Texas. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Yes, we're still going over the basics. I designed these modules to be a basic foundational education for you as a precinct chair, and I hope you're having fun. Again, this I learned from some others about Vince Lombardi at his football training camp. He would hold up a football and he would say, "This is a football." Now, obviously, they knew what a football was, but it never hurts to go over the basics and have a solid foundation. So, who are we supposed to be? We are a people who are supposed to be self-governing. I believe that is what Ben Franklin meant by a republic if you can keep it. So, as the Republican Party of Bexar County, how do we do that? Well, one of the ways is by remembering the basic constitutional principles. So here's a list of the 8 basic constitutional principles. Number 1, we believe in popular sovereignty. That means that the power comes directly from the people. 2, we believe in limited government. The government of the United States is limited by our written laws. 3, we believe in the separation of powers. This creates a government in which power is equally divided. There are 3 branches of government: the legislative, they're the branch that makes laws; the executive, which carries out the laws; and the judicial, which interprets the law. Number 4, checks and balances. There are 3 branches with the authority to check the power of the others, and we certainly need to see more of that. Number 5, we believe in individual rights. The Bill of Rights protects our individual and unalienable rights. 6, we believe in federalism. This splits the power between a national or federal government and the local governments. 7, we believe in republicanism. We are not a direct democratic government, but a republic where people vote for representatives who then make the decisions for them. And 8, we believe in judicial review. The Supreme Court can declare laws unconstitutional. That, again, is one of the checks and balances. It is amazing how many people really don't know their rights or the different kinds of rights that there are. So let's talk about inalienable rights. What are inalienable rights? Here's 2 things that have to fit in order for them to be an inalienable right. Number 1, it exists simultaneously among all people. And 2, it does not confer any obligation on another person. If it doesn't fulfill those 2 stipulations, then it's not an inalienable right. So what are some examples of inalienable rights? Well, the freedom of speech. I don't need anybody's permission. Freedom of religion. I can worship according to the dictates of my heart. Freedom of the press. I can write what I would like. And the freedom to peaceably assemble. I can get together with others who think the way that I do. And Walter Williams said that a good question to ask is, what did we do before? So let's look at the difference between an inalienable right or a civil right. An inalienable right is that which cannot be legally or justly alienated or transferred to another. They come from our Creator. It is one of the ways that we are all created equal. Now, whereas civil rights are rights granted to you by the government, therefore they can be changed and they can be taken away by a new government or by the whims of man. What are some examples of civil rights? Well, we have what are called granted rights. These are rights given by a ruler or another person. Then we have legal rights. These are rights that are granted by law. And then we have constitutional rights, rights that are granted by a constitution. Note, the Bill of Rights did not give us rights. It identified inalienable rights that we already possessed. So here's an interesting list and kind of an interesting graphic on the right. Are these inalienable rights? Yes or no? And some of these are from the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is what that picture on the right is about. So how about the right of equality of outcome, or the right to freedom from hunger, the right to equality between men and women, the right to education, the right to medical treatment, the right to protection by law enforcement, the right to asylum in another country, the right to change your nationality, the right to a marriage and a family, the right to access public services in the country, the right to an adequate standard of living, the right to leisure, the right to enjoy the benefits of science, the right to enjoy art and culture, the right to free transportation. So we need to look at those and weigh those against the 2 stipulations that we saw in the previous slide. In this module, we're also going to take some time and look at Robert's Rules of Order. So hold on to your hat. It is about to get interesting. Here's a good question. Do we need rules? You have to play by the rules of the game, and then you have to play better than anyone else. Great quote by Albert Einstein. One reason people break rules is because there are too many of them. And rules should be simple and few. They should help us to play fairly. Here's a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. Ours is a government of liberty, by, through, and under the law. No man is above it, and no man is below it. To run effective CEC meetings, we need to have a working knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order. If people are abusing the rules, we need to have strategies in place to move the meeting forward and not get bogged down with frivolous, unproductive motions and resolutions. Therefore, we need to know some of the rules of the game. So what we're looking at are called rules of parliamentary procedure. So as stated in Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, rules of parliamentary law balance the rights of individuals or groups within an organization's total membership. And these rules are based on a regard for the rights of the majority, the minority, especially if a strong minority exists, say greater than 1/3, the individual members, those that are absent, and all these together. Ultimately, the will of the majority decides matters, but only after a full and free discussion. The first thing that happens before a CEC meeting is called the call. And this is sent out usually by email 2 weeks prior to our CEC meeting. It's also posted at beargop.org, our website, under Precinct Chair Resources. Resolutions and other documents will be posted there to review and study before the meeting. Items not submitted 2 weeks before the meeting will naturally not be there. And the call contains the meeting time and location, the agenda, old business, those items that were brought up at the last meeting but were never either fully discussed or voted on, and then new business, new items to be taken up. So here's an example of what the call would look like. You can see it says CEC call and agenda, and this was sent out by Jeffrey McManus, the county chair. It also talks about the county executive committee, the Republican Party of Bexar County, and the meeting is for Tuesday. Where it will be is the San Antonio Professional Firefighters Association. It gives you the address. Registration starts at 5. The meeting will convene at 6, and we plan on adjourning by 9 o'clock. And it tells you to RSVP to the executive administrator at beargop.org. Along with the call would be a copy of the GOP agenda. And here's an example of the agenda. Now, it won't have the red, white, and blue flags on the left and right, but here's a good example. So when we have the call to order and opening ceremonies, we'll have prayer and pledges. There'll be a determination of a quorum. We need to have 25% of the precinct chairs there in order to conduct business. 3, adoption of the agenda. 4, appointments. 5, reading and approval of the minutes. 6, elections. Maybe there's some new precinct chairs that are filing for vacant precincts. 7, special recognitions. 8, guest speakers. This is usually going to be candidates invited to speak. 9, we sometimes will have the chairman's commentary. 10, 15-minute open mic. You have to sign in to be able to speak. And I think each person is given like 2 or 3 minutes. 11, unfinished old business. 12, acceptance of written committee reports. 13, administrative and campaign update. And then finally, 14, new business, motions, and resolutions. And then the last thing we would do is adjournment. So here's some things that happen at every CEC meeting. So the meeting will be called to order. We'll have an opening prayer and pledges. There'll be a call for the agenda to be accepted, and the same with the minutes from previous meetings. And there'll be some reports read. These things are just the nuts and bolts of the meeting, the necessities that need to be handled before we can move forward. And you would think that would be a no-brainer, but you would be wrong. In the past, you can tell how the meeting will go if we get bogged down with any of those things. So what could happen? Well, sometimes we have problems with the agenda. In the past, we've actually taken an hour and a half to change the order of 2 15-minute items on the agenda. To me, that was not a very good use of our time, and a lot of those attending felt the same way. Another time, there was a question on who was praying, and we spent about 30 minutes discussing whether the chairman had the right to ask somebody to pray. Things like this is where you begin to spot those in the CEC that are moving to their own agenda. The agenda actually goes out 2 weeks ahead of time, and that is for a reason. If you have a problem with the agenda, Why not take it up with the county chair before the meeting? If the county chair thinks you have a good point, they will make a change. If not, then wait patiently like the rest of us. There is also generally a management meeting that's prior to the CEC meeting. Anyone can attend. You could ask to be recognized and make your case then. These are things that can be done rather than taking time during the CEC meeting. In a word, I would call it having respect for the others attending. Let's talk a little bit about motions and resolutions. This is the real work of the CEC. Motions and resolutions may be made by any member of the CEC, and this is a powerful reason to be a precinct chair. We are endeavoring to move the party at the local level in the direction we want it to go. We are also building coalitions within the party of those that agree with us. Motions should be emailed to the chair by way of the executive administrator, and these motions will be posted to our website for the members to read. Again, remember, it's important to look over these so that you are prepared to vote. If it is less than 2 weeks before the next CEC meeting, you can still make a motion when we get to new business. The motions that went out with the call will usually be taken up first. If there is still time, you may rise to make your motions. Motions should be clearly written so those assembled will be able to vote. If your motion was not included in the call, you should make copies to be distributed at the CEC meeting for all to read. Now, we all understand that there could be an item or two from the old business that we would need to discuss and vote on. That is completely appropriate. Hopefully, we are also ready to move to new business. This is where new resolutions and motions are presented. This is the real work of the party at the CEC meeting. In the next few slides, we will look at motions, seconding, and the different types of voting you may see at a CEC meeting. Understanding the motion process, making a motion. The agenda will list the order of items for new business. When it is your turn, you go to the mic. You say, "Mr. Chairman." The chair recognizes the member to speak, such as, "My name is Alan Hamilton, Precinct 3102. I move a motion to have paper ballots at all future elections." Note, be sure to mention your precinct number so the secretary can include it in the minutes. Now, when you're making a motion, you do not read the whole motion. Use only the title or a short purposeful statement for the motion. Then you can sit down. The chair will then wait for it to be seconded before moving it forward. Understanding the motion process, seconding the motion. Another member that believes the motion is worth considering says, "I second the motion." The motion is now ready to be considered by the body. Now, here's an interesting strategy. Even if you are against the motion and hope it will not pass, you might still second the motion. Why? Well, this will open the motion to discussion where you can speak against the motion. Then, if it fails, it will most likely not come up again for a while. Understanding the motion process, discussing the motion. Motions and resolutions are posted on the website, and hopefully everyone went there and read them. I can dream, can't I? The motion has been seconded, so now what happens? The chair will then say, "Is there any debate?" The chair waits to see if anyone rises to speak for or against the motion. If there is, the chair will instruct a maximum of 3 to speak for and 3 to speak against. These will line up near the mic. They will alternate with those speaking for going first. After they have spoken, the chair will then close discussion and call the question. What is the question? The question is the call for a vote. What if no one rises to discuss the motion? Does that really happen? Yes, some motions are on an issue where there is unity, common interest, and support. In those cases, the chair will say, "Without objection," and the chair will then pause. This is your last opportunity to speak if you want to. The motion passes. Understanding the motion process, calling for a vote. So let's review. The motion has been made, we say moved. The motion was seconded. The motion was discussed. It's now time to vote. The chair will then restate the motion so that we know what we are voting on. They will use the title, that was why we don't read the whole motion, and they'll say, "Are you ready for the question?" If you have a problem, you get to speak again. And this would need to be a point of order or a parliamentary inquiry. And we'll talk about these in a bit, so hold your horses, Grasshopper. The chair then calls for a vote. They will say, "All those in favor say aye." Now, if you have any pirate in your family genealogy, make sure that you say that with a pirate accent. Just kidding. Then the chair will say, "Those opposed say nay." And no, you don't have to sound like a horse. The chair then determines which side had the most support and announces the result of the vote. What if it is hard to determine which side had the most support? The chair may choose to use a different method of voting. This could be for privacy reasons, as with an election, or it could be because the assembly has become unruly. And I have sure seen that. You have people that are just screaming. Anyway, let's not be those kinds of people. Understanding the motion process, methods of voting. So we talked about a voice vote. That's where we have the A's and the nays. And if the assembly is too boisterous, if members are yelling to try to pass or defeat a motion, the chair may choose a different method. And I have also seen where the chair reverses the order of the vote and will call the nays first. That way we get a real clear idea of if there's much popularity for the motion. Rising vote. This members are assembled and told to rise. Those four rise, and then we appoint counters by the chair to assist in the counting, and they'll go around and count all those four. Then they will sit down, and then those against rise. And again, they'll count those, and then the results of the vote are announced. And that will determine whether the motion carries or fails. We can also do a show of hands. This is a quick way to get a sense of who is for or who is against without a voice vote. If this is inconclusive, then a more formal vote can be taken. We also sometimes use voting cards. We do this especially if we're electing officials. Cards of a particular color are passed out to those who can vote. They write their vote on the cards. The cards are collected, counted, and the results announced. If there is another vote with cards, a different color will be used. And unanimous consent. If there were no objections, the chair may announce the motion passes by unanimous consent. So let's handle what can be done with motions. So let's talk about tabling a motion. A motion can be tabled because the wording is not clear. Let's say I rise to move a motion to have a better voting system. Okay, what does that mean? If I didn't submit the writing, if that's all I said, then we wouldn't really know what it would be. So instead of taking up valuable time, especially with over 100 in attendance, the motion can be sent to a special or standing committee for further review. And how is that done? Well, someone would rise and get the attention of the chair. When recognized, they would say, "I move that this motion be tabled and sent to a committee to evaluate, maybe rewrite, the motion." The chair would then call for a discussion and a vote, and if passed, the motion would be tabled. Many times we get to 9 p.m. and we run out of time. Tabling would save us valuable time on some of the motions. What can be done with motions? We're still talking about tabling motions. The motion can be tabled because it will cause division within the party. Let's say I rise to move a motion to censure John Cornyn. Now, it may be true that John Cornyn needs to be censured, but a motion that causes division is not helpful. It also takes up time that could be spent in other ways. In this case, the party may be divided on what to do with John Cornyn. There are other options we might explore first. For instance, I move that we appoint several persons to speak to John Cornyn about this issue. We should always try to talk to our elected officials and build relationships. Then a person or persons could be appointed to go talk with John Cornyn personally. If that does not yield fruit, then a letter of disapproval could be sent. There are several steps that can be taken before we consider censure. Censure should not just be a knee-jerk reaction. We should evaluate when to censure and apply it wisely instead of just getting angry with an elected official. The party needs to speak for the majority and not just a vocal minority. What can be done with motions? We're still talking about tabling a motion. The motion can be tabled and sent to a reconciliation committee. This would be a special committee appointed by the chair for motions that need additional research. The chair would appoint at least 3 people. Example, we recently spent nearly a whole meeting discussing gambling casinos in Bexar County. There was a minority that were paid by a powerful lobby to promote this issue to all precinct chairs. Another minority thought this was a bad idea. It turned out to be very divisive for the party. This could have been sent to a reconciliation committee to be researched and then brought back to the CEC. As it turned out, it was really a state law issue. We took up much time debating it, amending it, and then in the end, it didn't pass anyway. What can be done with motions? This is amending a motion. This means that some of the wording would be changed. When a motion is up for discussion, we try to project it on a screen or on the wall so that everybody can read. And again, it's posted, if it went in 2 weeks before, it's posted on the website. After reading the motion, it might need some minor improvements, some different wording. First of all, the amendments need to have the approval of the one moving the original motion, in which case the mover might say, I move the motion be adopted as written. In this case, we would discuss it as written and then vote on it as written. What can be done with motions? Well, it can be postponed indefinitely or for a certain period of time. How would you do this? You would say, you'd stand, get the attention of the chair, and then you'd say, I move that this motion be postponed and brought up at the next meeting. These options would be discussed and then presented for a vote to be passed by the majority. What can be done with motions? This would be points of order. The chair has the duty of making sure that the rules are followed. Any member may call attention to a violation of the rules of order or the bylaws. To do so, you may interrupt the chair or person speaking, and without waiting to be recognized, call out, point of order. The one speaking pauses, and the chair says, the member will state their point of order. Their point of order is then explained. No second is necessary and no vote is taken. The chair stands and rules on the point of order. The chair may also consult with the parliamentarian. The chair will rule and briefly give an answer. Some have used this to disrupt meetings. This is especially true when the matter could have been handled before the meeting instead of waiting and using up valuable time. I mention this because many have become disillusioned by the lack of genuine progress and the infighting that we see at CEC meetings. Important matters do not get handled because of the egos that we see clearly on parade. What can be done with motions? Parliamentary inquiry. If you want to ask a question about the rules and how they apply to what is before the Assembly, you might make a parliamentary inquiry. If your question requires immediate attention, you may interrupt the speaker. You do not need to be recognized. You stand and say, a parliamentary inquiry, please. The chair replies. The member will state their inquiry. For instance, you might say, would it be in order to refer this to a committee? The chair has the duty of responding to such questions. The chair's answers are not ruling and therefore not subject to appeal. Robert's Rules of Order are designed to keep meetings moving forward and not stopping them. What can be done with motions? Calling the question. A popular tactic is called calling the question. It's also referred to as the previous question. A member will yell out question or vote. Why do they do that? Well, it stops the debate immediately. Then a 2/3 vote would need to be made to continue. Now, according to Robert's Rules 16.4, the previous question is not allowed in committees. Therefore, if this comes up at a county executive committee meeting, the chair will rise and address the person calling the question and rule them out of order. The chair may explain why this is not appropriate and instruct others about this rule. Watch for this when it happens. What can be done with motions? Well, you can call for a recess. This calls for a break to be taken before business commences or resumes. For instance, additional information may need to be distributed, or at the beginning of a meeting, because it is perceived that a quorum is not present, You might say, I move that we recess for 15 minutes, and this needs a majority vote of those present. What can be done with motions? Call to suspend the rules. Now, this is used if the assembly wants to do something that would violate one or more of its regular rules. It can be made at any time that no question is pending. It must be seconded and requires a 2/3 vote. Now, why would you use this? The object is to allow consideration of business that could not otherwise be done in the time remaining. For instance, if the meeting is running late and there is a concern about getting to an important issue, a motion to suspend the rules, in this case a change in the approved agenda, might be a good idea. What can be done with motions? Dilatory and improper motions. A motion is considered dilatory if it seeks to obstruct the will of the assembly. Any motion that is frivolous or that contains no rational proposition is dilatory and should not be introduced. This also includes repeated calls for rulings of the chair, that is, say, a call for a division, which means recounting the vote, when the result was evident to all. It might also be calls for multiple quorum counts or frequent calls to adjourn the meeting. These would all be things basically just to obstruct the meeting. It is the duty of the chair to prevent a minority from using parliamentary procedure whose intent is to obstruct party business. Motions may also be considered improper if they conflict with state or local laws or the state party platform. Whenever the chair becomes convinced that one or members are using parliamentary procedures for dilatory purposes, they should refuse to recognize them or rule them out of order. What can be done with motions? This is a quorum count. As the meeting progresses, some members may start to leave. It is perceived that a quorum is no longer present. A member may rise to call for a quorum count. The member says, point of order. When recognized by the chair, the member states, I request a count be made to see if we still have a quorum. If there is no longer a quorum, it might be a good time to make a motion to adjourn. What can be done with motions? Motion to adjourn. This can be done at any point in the meeting. So if the meeting is really not going well, say there's confusion or a lack of interest, anyone can rise to call for an adjournment. If the majority votes to adjourn, the meeting is over. This is actually one of the strongest motions that can be made. So let's take some time and talk about how to write a resolution. We sometimes also call these motions. Now, why? This is really taking a step forward. This is where the rubber meets the road. This puts you in the arena instead of just watching from the bleachers. Now, I got involved in 2021 by learning about the Precinct strategy. Before that, I was a Tea Partier, which means taxed enough already. The goals of the Precinct strategy is to fill vacant precinct chair positions with moral men and women that have three things: a godly conscience, a love of our Constitution, and a desire to put the United States back on its Judeo-Christian foundation with liberty and justice for all. Are you that kind of person? I am praying you are. We're still talking about how to write a resolution. So where are we? For 2 years, I've been watching as different factions within the Republican Party here in Bexar County have fought amongst themselves. As a result, it appears that very little is getting done at the county level. I have learned that this has been going on for decades. Yes, I said decades. We need to identify what has been going on and then figure out how to turn this battleship around. So, how are we doing? Well, we could ask ourselves, are we winning elections? Are we more red, or are we moving into the red, blue, purple color? If I was to give a state of the party speech, I would say we are losing ground. We used to dominate San Antonio City Hall, especially the judges at the city and county levels. Instead, it seems that we're picking fights with our party leadership. At CEC meetings, we are still arguing over the agenda. Maybe we think that changes in the bylaws will solve the problem. Maybe if we censor this elected official, they will start voting the right way. Well, have they? To be honest, it reminds me of the argument for socialism. You just don't understand. We haven't done it the right way. This time, we'll get it right. We're still talking about how to write a resolution. So, where do we go from here? We need more unity and less fighting, that is for sure. We need to stand behind our local Republican leadership and see where we can make a difference. Focusing on our belly buttons will not get the job done. Maybe we need to actually start liking each other and being thankful for those of us in the foxhole. So, who attends CEC meetings? Well, I see a lot of the same old faces. Actually, that includes me too. We need to reach the younger generations, and soon. All it takes for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. So, how do we do that? Well, I'm working on it. I hope you are too. Unity and synergy are powerful weapons for change. We can win if we do it together. So, let's learn some more on how to write resolutions. So, here we go. We need to build coalitions. It's time to identify those who will get out and work their precincts. It is time to start winning. In the past, I have described the Democrat Party as being on the fast track to socialism, and I've described the Republican Party as being on a slow track to socialism, but both are still headed in the same direction. Now we can see that we have been fighting against an organized uniparty in conjunction with the administrative state. So let's get started. How to write a resolution. Step 1. Choose what to write about. What do we want to accomplish with this resolution that we're working on? Last legislative session, I went to TLO, that's the Texas Legislature online. It's where you can find a listing of bills. And I went through and looked at the bills being filed at the House and Senate levels for 2023. Do you know what I found? 95%, and yes, that's a guess, but I would call them window dressing. They were things like, we want to reconcile so-and-so for their 100-year anniversary. We want to name this street after Daffy Duck. We want the state of Texas to call the third Tuesday in August as Clean Up the Padre Island Beach Day. Now, those are all maybe well and good things, and I think the elected officials that represent those areas can and should do that. But do we really need to recognize those at the state level? Is that really what our legislators come together every 2 years to do? I think some like the recognition that they filed the most bills. So, if I write 500 window dressing bills, how has that helped the party? It hasn't. Therefore, what do we think needs changing in Bexar County that would be improved with a resolution? That's step number 1. So, how to write a resolution? Let's look at step 2. I call this the nuts and bolts. So, let's look at what needs to be in a resolution. Now, I've put several resolutions on our page for Precinct video training. They are in a folder called Handouts for Precinct Training. Copy and print them. And we're going to start by looking at one I submitted called Hand Counting of Paper Ballots. How to write a resolution, step 2. We're still talking about the nuts and bolts. So, the title of the resolution is Hand Counting of Paper Ballots. Now, the first line is the title of this resolution. We also call it a motion. And this is what I would announce when I stand to make motions. Remember, you don't read the whole motion, just the title. I also would have submitted this 2 weeks before the CEC meeting, so it could go out with the call. Then we have some whereases. So first there was a title, and then you have the whereases. So let's read some of these. Whereas recent elections have cast doubt on accuracy in the use of electronic vote tabulation, and whereas many voters no longer trust the election results tabulated electronically, and whereas manually counted paper ballots have been used for decades without voters distrusting the results, and whereas observers can easily observe the counting of paper ballots, ensuring the accuracy of the tabulations. So there's the whereases, and this is where we identify the problem that we want to fix. The next section is what we are proposing and who we want to help us with this. So we have the title, then we have the whereases, and then we have the resolve. So let's read these. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Republican Party of Bexar County, Texas, assembled as the County Executive Committee, demands that future elections in Bexar County, Texas, be done exclusively with hand-tabulated paper ballots. Tabulating to be viewed by at least 2 poll watchers and 1 election judge per precinct. Poll watchers shall be represented by both parties. Additional volunteers will be recruited on the day of election to help with the tabulation. All ballots will be secured and guarded by the election judge. A chain of custody log shall be required for a legislatively required preservation period. So there's the resolves. And this is the part where we want to clearly lay out what we would like to see implemented. After this, we look at who we want to decide, and so who this is sent to, and who we believe it can get it done. So next is who we are ordering to get this done. So it is hereby ordered that this resolution be presented to our Bexar County Commissioners. It is hereby ordered that this resolution be presented to our Bexar County Elections Department. It is hereby ordered that this resolution be presented to our State Executive Committee Chair, Matt Rinaldi, and other members of the SREC. These are the people that I would like to send this to and get their help to get this done. And I think this is a good example of something that could make a huge difference in getting fair elections that are both transparent and verifiable. The next part of the resolution is who needs to sign this. So I prepare the resolution in such a way that it can be signed and executed. So this is what it would say. This resolution passed this 12th day of September 2023 by a quorum of precinct chairs assembled. And then if it passed, then Jeff McManus would sign that, and then Dina Abiasi would sign it. And these will need to sign it and then send it to the people that I recommended. That was in the ordered part. As a motion before the CEC, this would be open to being changed or amended. It would also be open to be discussed and then finally put to a vote. And this is how you write a resolution. Now remember, we also submit resolutions at the precinct convention level and at the senatorial convention and at the state convention. Now here's a couple of books I have in my library when you can use these. I would start with Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief. That's just a really great book, and you can read a little bit every week and become real familiar. Then the one on the right is the whole kit and caboodle. It's about an inch and a quarter thick. So if you really want to get into the weeds, then order the whole book, 12th edition. So here's some other things you can do. On YouTube, if you search under parliamentary procedures, you'll find a whole bunch of videos. And if you do a little bit here and a little bit there over time, you'll really be surprised at how much you can learn. On the next 2 slides, you'll see some handouts for parliamentary procedure. And I've also placed these on the website under handouts for precinct training. And I think you'll find these very helpful. So this is called a motions guide. And you can see the numbers on the left will be the section that you would find it in Robert's Rules of Order. It talks about what it is, what you say. You can see whether you can interrupt, whether it needs to be seconded, whether the debate needs to take place, whether it can be amended, and what kind of a vote would be necessary. This is a really great handout. And here's some other motions. Again, same thing on the left. You see the section number where you'd find it, and then what you say, and if you can interrupt, second, whether debate or amended, and what kind of a vote would be necessary. So we're wrapping up Module 5, and you are now even more prepared than you were before for the next CEC meeting. And we've talked a lot about motions, how to make motions, and also resolutions. And I think this will really help. Go over this more than once if you need to, and it'll help you to really become familiar with what's happening at CEC meetings. Okay, blessings. We've had these before. One man awake. One man awake awakens another. The second awakens his next door neighbor. And 3 awake can rouse the town and turn the whole place upside down. And many awake can raise such a fuss that it finally awakens the rest of us. One man up with dawn in his eyes multiplies. And this one too, the man who thinks he can. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but don't think you can't, but think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you lose, you're lost. For out of the world we find, success begins with a person's will. It's a state of mind. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the strongest or faster man, but sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks they can. Okay, that does it for Module 5. Again, the PDF version of this is also available on the website, and you can download that and print it out, and I think that'll be a valuable resource for you. Okay.